Misfits took so much from the Ramones. Like the Misfits, one of the early criticisms of them was that they were a Ramones knockoff. Like they were literally went to see the Ramones and started a band. Like they are the band with that story in the first run of it. So I would say, yeah, they're extremely influential, obviously, and you can argue like influence wise. I think that can be an actual debate, but I still think as we knew it and as it came to be, the Ramones did create pop punk.
What's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome back to the Punk Rock Review Podcast. Rob over here, Punk Ots. Make sure and go check out his channel. Link in the description. We got a good video this time, man. This podcast is going to be probably polarizing and controversial, I would say. Not in a negative way, but because of the people that we're covering. So this is going to be the top 10 Misfits songs. Now, we have got this divided up. I'm going to do a top 5 Michael Graves Misfits songs, and then we're going to go with our top 10 Danzig songs. I'll make my part a little quicker on that one so he can talk more, but this might be a long video, long podcast. Before we get started, though, I want to say thank you to everybody who has subscribed to the channel. We just hit 1,000 subscribers, and it didn't take as long as I thought it was going to, so thank you to everybody that subscribed. I really appreciate it. I've got some really big things happening on my Patreon right now, so if you're interested in that, check it out. No worries if you're not. And, yeah, man, all the songs from tonight are going to be on the Punk Rock Review playlist on Spotify. Be sure to check that out. There's a link to that in the description as well. Let's get started. Before we get into these lists, I got 2 or 3 quick questions. The first is going to be, I was listening to these songs, and I kept getting a specific melody and a specific feel from really early Misfits music. And I've always thought of the Ramones as the first pop punk band. But they're widely considered just a punk rock band. Are the Misfits the first pop punk band? Because, dude, I'm telling you, if you just recorded them a little better and didn't sound like Elvis, you'd have Blink-182 on a lot of these songs. Not all of them, but a lot of them. What do you think about that? How do you feel about the Misfits being the first pop punk band?
I think the Ramones could keep the title because the Misfits took so much from the Ramones. Like the Misfits, one of the early criticisms of them was that they were a Ramones knockoff. Like they were literally went to see the Ramones and started a band. Like they are the band with that story in the first run of it. So I would say, yeah, they're extremely influential, obviously, and you can argue like influence wise. I think that can be an actual debate, but I still think as we knew it and as it came to be, the Ramones did create pop punk. I think
I didn't even
have a slight edge there.
While I think I do agree with you, I just thought it was interesting because the Ramones, while they are, in my personal opinion, the originators of that sound, and they do have a lot of pop influence. Boy, I tell you, man, the Misfits have almost all pop influence. It's just a little bit sped up, dude. They've got like 50s pop songs. The Ramones is all fast. It's got a punk attitude to it. And the Misfits do sometimes, but the Misfits got some swanky, slow jams, dude. I don't remember the Ramones ever having any of that. And I forgot about the fact that they went and saw the Ramones and then like went and started the Misfits. It just kind of passed through my brain. But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting thing we should at least bring up as a point of conversation, because all these bands that we think of up until like the 90s, a lot of them are just covering pop and R&B songs from the 50s, not actually covering them, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
well, replicating,
playing,
yeah.
And like, even if you listen to bands like Blood for Blood, they literally do cover 60s pop and R&B ballads. They literally do that. A lot of hardcore punk bands get their style and their melodies, their simple chord progressions from that era and from that kind of music. And so the Misfits are an early example of what pop punk could have been. I mean, it's weird, man, because the only stuff that I think the difference is that you have stuff like Oi and street punk that come out, or else everything would be pop punk, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the 2 strands though too, right? You have the Ramones strand, you have the Pistol strand, and I think everything else kind of divides off of that. And it's funny because, like, again, the Misfits are way more directly on the Ramones side of the ledger. But I think a lot of the street and the Oi stuff probably owes its roots a little bit more, a lot to the Ramones too in New York specifically, but a lot to the UK stuff and to the Sex Pistols. So there is that divide. I think, like, similar to the Ramones, the Misfits are an extremely American band. Like, they are very, very American. Like, their identity is very, very American, and the whole idea of their band, kind of similar to the Ramones, is a takeoff of a piece of American pop culture from years past. And that is the spirit of punk. I mean, Johnny Ramone said it all the time. He wasn't trying to, they weren't trying to create punk. They were just trying to do rock and roll like they grew up on, not the rock and roll that was on the chart, not the Jefferson Airplane and stuff like that at the time. And so that's why it's more in common with, like, the Beach Boys than it is with, like, a Jefferson Airplane. And that's really where the lineage is really at, that traditional rock and roll in that kind of way.
I think a lot of people forget about the fact that punk rock is just an offshoot of rock and roll, because I was listening to AC/DC, like, voluntarily. I just was in the mood for it. Mm-hmm. And so I was listening to some of their older material, and I added a couple of songs to the punk rock review playlist. And I thought, these fit with anything that sounds remotely like One Man Army, the Briggs, the Menzingers, all that stuff, dude. Any of that dad punk stuff, that's all that is rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of people forget about that, or they don't mention it enough, or whatever. Anyways, it wasn't something I wanted to spend a ton of time on, but I thought it was an interesting topic that they sounded so poppy. Like, you think the Misfits and you think dark, you think Halloween, you think horror movies, you think kind of gnarly and a little gruesome, but you don't think swanky 50s pop. You know what I'm saying? But in reality, you should.
Well, and that's why they have the connection. Like, if you can play a Misfits song, then you can play a Blink-182 song like a few weeks later, because they're basically the same thing. And in fact, one thing where I think the Misfits are more similar to, like, Blink-182 and those later bands, is they have the odd rhythms in their songs, where the Ramones have that difficult to replicate pace, but it's very straightforward. It's not necessarily odd. It's very straightforward, where the innovation that the Misfits really had, and I think it was somewhat because they couldn't keep time with each other, and they would have these odd time things that are so common in.
That's what I was going to say. Is that they were just kind of bad musicians, and it ended up evolving music a little bit by just accident.
It did, and we talked about before how that's really, that stereotype doesn't really work with punk, except for on early punk. And now we're talking about a band, though, that goes all the way back to the 70s and did most of the damage in the early era. We're just happen to be more famous in their later eras. It's just a weird career that they have had. And there's no one else like that. Yeah,
interesting career. I've got two quick questions, and then we'll get on to this list. So, okay, when you distinguish, or when you think about Misfits, you have two eras. You have Michael Graves versus Glenn Danzig, right? Mm-hmm. Most people, they just naturally go Danzig. I found it interesting when I was doing this that there was something that I'd never thought of before, and that is that when you listen to each version of this band, you get two completely different things. On one hand, you've got really excellent recordings and really well-written songs, great performances. The Michael Graves era stuff is objectively better music. Now, does that mean that the songs are better or that we like them more? No. But they are, like, if you just gave them to somebody that had nothing to do with punk and said, here, listen to these two groups of songs, which one's better? I would venture to say almost everybody's going to go this stuff and point to those two records, right? Because they're similar in sound and style. Mm-hmm. Okay, a little more metal, but they're similar. But the recording quality, everything's so much better. But what I found interesting was that when I went back to the Danzig stuff, I was transported back in time, and I could hear something great happening that you don't get with the Michael Graves stuff. You might get great songs, and I personally really enjoy that music. It's hard to do it now, you know, hindsight being 2020 and all, with some of the things that guy's been associated with. But just speaking of his music, I really enjoy it a lot. Like, when my first real fandom was the Michael Graves Misfits. But I was transported back in time, going back. I listened to this stuff a lot this week, and you could hear creation happening. Does that make sense? You could hear innovation. You could hear, like, these guys full of life, full of desire to do something. I don't know. It was translated through the sound of these really poorly recorded songs quite a bit more than I remember. And I would like to have your thoughts on that. Do you ever think about that kind of stuff? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm kind of similar to you in that my original Misfits was also the Graves Misfits, because that was just the Dig Up Ramones video or whatever was just kind of out at about that time, and that was the Misfits that was on the wrestling show, was the Michael Graves Misfits. As Misfits, the company kind of became a thing. Michael Graves was at the center of it.
When you're young, you only have a certain amount of stuff you can get to. You don't have, it takes time to be able to dig into this stuff on any level. That's why we have gateway bands.
There wasn't as much of it. Like I remember I had the collection albums for years. That was the only Misfits like Danzig that I ever owned, because it wasn't as easy to get your hands on everything the way like this weekend where the box set is uploaded to Spotify. So literally you can have all the versions of these same songs and hear how they progress very, very quickly. But you got to remember the time difference is kind of jarring, because it's like 83 or 84 that the Danzig era is over. It's 97. So it is a totally different time period of both music and society. Like everything is so much different. And I think the Misfits and the brand is already such a thing that, you bring in Graves and he's just there to join something that, that's kind of already decided. I feel like in a lot of ways, not that he didn't put his own spin on it, because he definitely did. But
I was going to say
than what you're saying though, with the growth and stuff, where that kind of is something with more potential, where it's kind of maybe as good as it could have been in the Graves era too. Like that's are we really mad that we didn't get more Graves albums? Like it probably could have been good music, but maybe that was as good of it, where with the original stuff, could that have evolved? I don't know.
So I actually have an interesting point on that, is that I don't think I want more Graves stuff. I'm glad we got 2 good albums in out. We don't have a bunch of bad crap from him. He came in, he did 2 really great albums, and he left. And I think if you go to the question of like which is better, I hate that question with this specific example, because there's very rarely an instance where you're talking about this and they're so different and they mean so much different, because you have a group of kids trying to start something, then you have an established band that just changes vocalists, and honestly, it's like 2 different bands almost. Lyrical content aside, it's almost 2 completely different bands.
It's way less than like we talked about Pennywise with their one album they made with the other singer. That was very much more similar to a Pennywise album than how the way this stuff sounds, that early Misfits stuff. Like that is again, I didn't know the Misfits were really involved in punk until like a few years after the fact, because in this Graves era too, I felt like they were more associated with metal. Like I learned about the Misfits a lot through like bands like Metallica covering them and stuff, and their imagery was more metallic and all that, and it felt like that was where they were stranglehold. Whereas you listen to and I knew of Danzig, and Danzig himself as a solo artist is more associated with metal than punk. But the Misfits themselves are unequivocally, like you said, just basically pop punk. Punk with a Halloween theme all year round. That is what the Misfits are.
I will say this, and I'll try to move on because I got one more question. This shouldn't take as long. I knew this was going to be a long night, dude. This is a very, very fun topic to cover. So when I was 15, that's when the Grave stuff came out, right? Dude, I didn't even know it was a different guy. The recording sounded so different. Like nobody told me that. I was around a bunch of rednecks, man. I bought music that I liked because I liked it. I didn't know to look into it and try to figure it out. It didn't even occur to me to look at who was singing, because I just thought it was the same dude. I put it on and went skateboarding. I remember where I bought the first Misfits album from Graves. I bought it at Diamond Head Records on Louetta out here in Klein, right outside of Houston. Bro, I can tell you exactly where this place was at. I remember where I skateboarded at that day. It's crazy how vivid that memory is, because that cover is iconic. The songs, bro, I'm telling you, I really enjoy those albums. But I don't think there is a right answer to which is better. I think it just depends on who you are. Because if you're older than me, you're probably just going to say Danzig. If you're young, you're going to say Danzig because that's the right thing to say because you want to be cool. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of courage to say that you really like the Michael Graves stuff, because most people give people crap for that. And now, I don't know that I like it better than the Danzig stuff. I look at it completely different. And after this past week, I definitely think it's a lot slimmer on which I like better. Because I think last week I would have said the Graves stuff. But after going back and re-listening to all this Misfits stuff all week, I was like, dang, I don't know, man, because it was hard. We were starting with a top 5 list. We ended up with a top 10 list. I wasn't going to even have a list. I have a list. Like, it clearly evolved. So, let's move on from that. The last question I have is one that's going to really – I wonder if you were waiting for me to say something about this. But
shoot.
Who did Halloween better, the Misfits or AFI?
Go ask the 900,000 people who have commented on this on my short I made with this exact
Oh
question.
no!
Yeah.
Oh, did you do that?
Yeah, I did that as a short. Whose version is better? A real simple video that I just clipped together.
Oh wow! Well, I'll have to
yeah.
like inject that video into this video somehow. So what was the conclusion you came to?
It's AFI. AFI's version is better.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go. Okay.
Not only that, I actually also maybe can make an argument for Alkaline Trio's super slow version of Halloween as well. Maybe not as better, but
I don't
that's
like
a pretty
that
awesome song. No, I love it with the video that's up on YouTube.
I've never seen the video.
The horror movie. Yeah, I like that version a lot.
Alkaline Trio is like a top 5, maybe top 10 band all time for me. Like it's way up there for me.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the few songs that I don't care for by Alkaline Trio. And I don't say that with any disrespect, but the AFI version of Halloween is just so powerful. The Misfits version, great song. Mm-hmm. But the issue is that the first one that I heard was the AFI one. And so
same.
Yeah. So like I heard a really good version of that song, and then they were like, yeah. I was like, man, this sounds, I guess I heard it and like paid attention to it because I was like, man, it sounds kind of familiar. And somebody goes, yeah, it's a Misfits cover. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. I didn't even care. I was like, oh, okay. And then I went back later and listened to it and was like, underwhelming. Like I would imagine that some people are going to be super irritated by that. And I don't mean to irritate anybody. I just thought it would be an interesting, again, another topic for conversation, man. Like, and if you
AFI
do like the
does
version,
most things better than most other musicians do things. If it's AFI versus a lot of other musicians, AFI wins most of those arguments, like 94% of them. Dude. And especially on something that they're very good at, like horror punk themselves. Like, so like to me, it's more of it. That is the ultimate tribute, like their version being better. And here was my hot take on that. I've said this: the Misfits are the Bob Dylan of punk rock, and here's what I mean by that. Bob Dylan, I think he kind of sucks, to be honest with you, but he writes really good songs. Like Guns N' Roses did Bob Dylan better than Bob Dylan did Bob Dylan with Knocking on Heaven's Door. And there's the Hendrix song that Bob Dylan wrote. It's the only Hendrix song I really, really like, All Along the Watchtower. It's a Bob Dylan song. And I'm like, you know what? The Misfits, I like their songs a lot better sometimes when other people sing them because they didn't really know how to play yet when they were writing them. So then when a band like AFI that is totally tight gets together and puts that material together, it actually showcases the power of these songs. I think it's more of a compliment to the Misfits than it is a detraction from them.
That is an extremely elegant way of saying that. And I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense because here's the thing. One of the reasons why I was never a fan of the Misfits until I was an adult is because I didn't like the recordings and the terrible musicianship. I just didn't like it. It didn't appeal to me. Like, I understand. It's funny because as I get older, you think I would like better recording qualities, but I've kind of regressed and I like older Misfit stuff. I go look for these lo-fi shitty recorded bands that I find on YouTube all the time. I like that sound now. It goes along with the movies that I like too. It's weird. But when I was younger, I had to learn it. I had to grow into it. Like, look, man, I don't care what any kid tells you, dude. No kid very few kids listened to like Crass, GBH, and Minor Threat. Well, maybe not Minor Threat, but because they're pretty damn good off the jump. But like Crass and GBH and any of this like really bad recorded, even early Misfits, and just immediately loved it, dude. Like very few kids heard that and liked it. They liked stuff like The Unseen, Rancid, AFI, The Offspring, Green Day, and then they worked their way backwards to this stuff. If you were 20 years older than me, you liked the Misfits when they came out because that's what was available. Mm-hmm. But if there was other stuff available, there's no reason for me to believe that you just heard these poor recordings and immediately loved it. Now, you could appreciate it and the song could be good, but if you had an opportunity to listen to like an old DOA record versus like the Suicide Machines, it is so much easier to listen to Suicide Machines and you get similar content. You get similar talking points and you get similar song length, similar artwork. Similar, not the same, but it's like, bro, what are we doing here? Like,
that speaks to the era that we talk about, that at least I talk about, and you and I talk about a lot of that 90s era. That's the shift, right? Is then your punk could sound like music, so to speak, like it's representative of music, and that is the big difference. Whereas that's the other thing with this Misfits stuff is it actually speaks to the Misfits how much they endured because they're known for that bad quality. There's a lot of bad quality punk that was recorded in the olden times, but a lot of it didn't. Like we don't care about it. It is strictly relegated to that era, so we can we can accept that. We know these songs can be better. That's why sometimes I think we're a little tough on the sound quality on this stuff before, like you said,
100%.
learning to appreciate it, which I've done that getting older too. But that's why the Grave stuff has a certain appeal to it, because it's produced in 1997. It sounds, records in the late 90s to me never sounded better. Like that's the golden era of how stuff sounded. And you have Misfits content, even the rehashed Misfits content, which is, some people say it doesn't have its soul, like those collection series that came out in the 90s, because that especially Glenn edited out a lot of the bass to not give Terry as much credit. But it is more listenable though, objectively, even if it is kind of like compressed compared to what like I have what are the old vinyls I have sitting around here, which the Static Age vinyl, which like I love the sound of it because, as you're saying, because of the legend that the tape melted as they pulled it out and all that stuff. Like that's also part of the joy of having it, which wasn't a charm that really existed as much in the 90s. Like that's more of a modern thing, as we're more into retro culture and appreciate art on all different, movies could only used to happen on big screens. Now movies can happen on this thing, and we like them or dislike them for different reasons, and there's different artistic merit.
Well, it's funny because it doesn't matter. Like, do you like it or do you not? If you get to where you like it, that's the good thing, man. And you don't have to like it if you don't want to. There's no rule book in punk rock, or there might be to a certain degree, but even that is stupid. And I live by that rule book sometimes. I gatekeep sometimes, but I fully appreciate the fact that that's dumb. It is what it is, man. I'm not perfect. I'm flawed, and but I know what's right and what's wrong. And if you like something that's good. And the last thing I'll say before we move on to this list is that a lot of the reasons that they were recorded so badly back then is they just simply didn't have the way to do it better. In the 90s, they did. So they utilized it. I hate the fact that some people out there go, no, man, this sounds too good. It's not punk rock because it sounds too good. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, you want to spread a message, so you want the most people that can listen to it to listen to it. So why would you put out intentionally bad stuff unless you're one of the bands that are going for a niche audience? I am part of that audience now. Okay, I get it, but don't get mad when you sell 300 tapes and that's it. Like, that should be what you're looking to do. But if you want to sell records, you want to tour, and you want to be on a Warped Tour type stage, you have to be able to put a good recording out. And when it was available, they started doing it. And I think it's so weird that people just gripe and they go, like the argument that the old Rancid stuff is the best, like their early stuff, pre-Self-Titled 93 even. They're like, oh, the first 2 EPs are the best. No, you're one of those weird edgelord punks that think that don't even probably believe it. They just say it. So
yeah, because it's what you're supposed to say. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not that cool. Don't care. Okay, let's talk about some songs now. Okay, so my top 5 Michael Graves Misfits songs. I've got 3 that I want to just shout out real quick. I won't talk too much about them. I simply could not come up with just 5. I couldn't do it, man. On 2 albums, I could not. I barely got it to 8. So the 3 that I just want to shout out because they're really great are Scream. Love that song. And again, all these songs are going to be on the playlist. So if you want to check them out and you don't feel like going and looking through Misfit stuff, just throw them on playlist. It's 800 songs strong now. We have Crawling Eye, which, boy, I tell you, man, that is a good song. And then the one that I really, really kept flip-flopping between spot 6 and 5 is Speak of the Devil, because that's one of the catchiest songs that the Misfits have ever put out. That gets stuck in your head. It'll be in your head all day long, man. So, okay. Now the actual top 5, I think we're going to have a lot more to talk about with the Danzig stuff, but Die Monster Die is my number 5. I love that song. This music from this era is big, bold, bright. It's cinematic. I love this guitar tone that they came up with this in this era, because it doesn't exist otherwise. Even the post-Grave stuff, it sounds a little different. Those 2 records, you could basically just put them together as a 2-disc set. They sound almost identical, and the song quality is almost identical. Everything about it is pretty just, I couldn't believe how much they go. If you played me each of those songs and I hadn't been listening to them in a while, I don't think I could pick out which album they were on unless it was something. Yeah. But Die Monster Die is one of my favorite songs by them, period. But number 4, Mars Attacks is a song that I've probably listened to 500 times. I love that song. I love that movie. Yeah, man. How are you feeling about this list so far?
I like it. You're picking some of the more like the funner stuff from this era too. So the stuff that's like less almost Danzig derivative. That was weird about this era. They kind of inadvertently sounded like Danzig the band, not Danzig with the Misfits. They were doing that. And you have the stuff that's more actually would have fit slightly with the Danzig era, although not quite.
I have all the
more in the
pop
spirit
punk
of it.
stuff.
You do, yeah. That's what's funny. Which is funny because a lot of people who like this era are the more, like we said, the more metal guys who like some of the slower stuff.
Well, number 3 is Helena.
Mm-hmm.
That song, it was really hard to not put that song as number 1 because the lyrical content in that song is so effective. Man, when I first heard that, it's just real simple, dude. Nothing but a guitar. Dun, dun, dun. And if I cut off your arms and I cut off your legs, would you still love me? Love me? And dude, like, what are we doing with these lyrics, bro? Like, it's such a wonderful song. And I'm sorry, folks, for having to let you hear all that. I don't sing very well. My apologies.
Michael Graves is much better at that than he is.
A wee bit, but I'm a better person. So we're going to just
kind of a low bar there with Graves.
Yeah. Very low. I tripped and fell over it. But that song is so good, man. I remember when my dad heard that song, he was like walking by my room and he was like reading something. He has glasses on. I'll never forget it, dude, because I didn't see my dad a lot. So I have a few memories of him. And one of them is him like walking by. I could see his shadow. He stopped and I could see his head come up from like whatever it was he was looking at. And I guess he was listening to it for a minute and he kind of walked back and popped his head in and he goes, "Does your mother know you have this?" And I was like, "No, she absolutely does not. Because I don't want to be grounded." And he was like, "Yeah, just leave that here when you go home this weekend." And I was like, "Okay, Dad." And I just threw my backpack, took it home with me. Okay, number 2 is "Don't Open Till Doomsday." I love that song. It's so, dude, that's one thing about this era of Misfits that I think is almost unmatched and unbeatable. Like, this era created a lot of bands. Their songs are so catchy. And it's funny how you can have something like "Don't Open Till Doomsday" or the "Cut Off Your Arms." I mean, come on, really? Those songs are catchy and memorable, and like you can see girls singing to them and dancing. I've seen lots of females singing to this stuff. It's a certain type of romantic with the Misfits songs, and that's for both eras. It's a certain type of
it's like a crooning that they do. It's
crooning, yeah,
that's what it is. Yeah.
But the best Michael Graves Misfits song is, to nobody's surprise, "Dig Up Her Bones." So here's the funny thing about that, though. When I was making this list, I had it to 7 songs. And I was looking at it, and I was looking at it, and I was looking at it, and I was looking at it. I was like, "This is a pretty good list, man. I'm pretty happy with this." And I was going through Danzig stuff, and I had it on shuffle. And for some reason, it played "Dig Up Her Bones." And I went, "Wait a minute." And I looked back at my list, and I was like, well, that's clearly number 1. And I just wrote it in at number 1. Because, yeah, man, "Dig Up Her Bones," iconic song. How does that one go? Let's see. Yeah. Oh, my goodness, bro.
Everything is what she needs,
Dude.
The steps. But and that video being so lo-fi, and you and I talked about this before, that's the sweet spot, like the AFI sweet horror punk spot. It's not actually the dark part. It's like the B movie horror punk thing. And like there's like the crappy little headstones in that video, and like that's part of the charm.
Oh, yeah. He's like walking through that, like, he's walking through that graveyard that looks like a TV movie set.
Yes. Which for the Misfits, that's perfect because they're based off of like TV horror movies. That's exactly their deal. Yeah.
Your camera went all blurry for a second.
I don't know what happened where I went.
Your lighting.
Yeah, it's on auto, so it's
put your hand up to your camera, cover it, and then all the way. Put your palm up there. Now move it back slowly. Slowly. Like you got to move it back slowly. I'm not kidding. I used to do this all the time. No, move it back, bro. Like towards you. Like it's got to stay in focus. Boom. There it goes. Boom. Fixed it. Told you.
There. Look at that.
Ha! You can tell I used to have to do that a lot.
Yeah.
Anyways, dude. When I figured that out, I was so irritated because I had to do it all the time. But yeah, that video is really great. And every time you look up like a Michael Graves solo thing, it's always "Dig Up Her Bones." Mm-hmm. It's always "Dig Up Her Bones." That is probably in like competition with any Danzig song, I would think. I mean, Misfits song, excuse me. I would actually say Helena is probably as well. Those are probably two songs that are like in like the top tier of any Misfits song. But yeah, that would be my top 5 Michael Graves Misfits songs. Let me go ahead and throw these out one more time real quick. Top 5 Michael Graves songs are, with honorable mentions being Scream, Crawling Eye, Speak of the Devil. But number 5 is Die Monster Die. Number 4 is Mars Attacks. Number 3 is Helena. Number 2 is Don't Open Till Doomsday. And number 1 is, of course, Dig Up Her Bones. Let's move on to Danzig stuff. I would like you to talk now. Do what?
I was surprised you didn't mention Saturday Night. What was your take on Saturday Night? That's such a polarizing song and such a.
Is it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say polarizing, but it's a known song that a lot of people cover. Yeah, and it's one of the ones that like Graves always busts out on his sets, on his acoustic sets.
Okay.
Another one that I think people, check it out, because it's framed as this romantic 1950s slow, like almost like an O'Donna kind of ballad.
Yeah.
It's about him murdering her, in the backseat of their car.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I know
so
this
if you're not paying attention to the lyrics, it actually sounds like a very sweet romantic song.
Yeah, hold on. While you're talking, I'm gonna just pick up a little tiny snippet of it real quick.
Yeah. I was just wondering if there was any mention on that, just because that one is the one.
No,
I speak on.
I want to make sure I didn't. Let's see. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I really like that song, like a lot actually.
Mm-hmm.
But in my opinion, there was so many better songs on their records. I'm surprised that one gets covered. I don't know. Yeah. It's a good song, but I don't think it's close to their best.
It was one of like the known songs of the era too. That's part of why.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. I did think that's it's a good song. Like when I hear it, I like and I enjoy it, but it doesn't get me going. These other songs, they get me going, man.
Like you said, Dig Up Her Bones is just, I don't even consider that a Graves Misfits song. That's just a Misfits song. Like that, that one rises to that level of,
Yeah, it's such a good track. But yeah, Saturday Night's a good song, man. It does deserve a mention. I don't know. I think that the slow, swoony stuff that they do is like, it's cool, but they're so much better at faster up-tempo stuff, in my opinion, personal opinion. So I will get to my Danzig stuff after you do yours.
Okay. All right, so we're going to get started then?
Yes.
All right, so initially, as he said, we were going to do a top 5, and then he had texted me like, hey, let's expand it to top 10, which is good, because the top 5 was already so slotted in my head, there wasn't like a lot of room for growth, because like I wasn't not going to have things. And I still left some out of the top 5. So having a top 10 was good, but it ended up being 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, about 16 songs, I would say. And there could have been more. Maybe there could have been less. But
yeah, mine ended up being 12.
Some of my outside looking ins were obviously Die Die My Darling, classic song. Just happened to not be in my top 10. The song I learned about who the Misfits were because of that song from other bands covering them.
Dude, spoiler alert, that didn't even touch my list.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get help for that.
Yeah, I thought you would have that. I thought you were gonna say, "Oh, that was on my list," like on the on the charts. I also had "Teenagers from Mars," just absolutely just a fun song. A lot of these songs don't have a lot of lyrics to them, and you could just sing the chorus over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Ghouls Night Out is one that I've always just find entertaining. That like could be in like a 1950s horror movie, like actually without any edits to it at all. Of course, the iconic "Mommy, Can I Go Out and Kill Tonight?" when it builds to the the live versions of Glenn just screaming that at the top of his lungs. Also, shout out to everyone who has the Bobby Hill tattoo that says "Mommy, Can I Go Out and Grill Tonight?" with Hank Hill with the devil lock.
Oh my goodness!
I have Earth AD. Now I don't love all of this stuff when it gets so repetitive with them. Like sometimes Earth AD can be like that, like AD, it's going.
Yeah.
And then of course She, which is one of the many songs that we got into lyrical content would get you demonetized. So we'll just say that one as well. And we'll go into a few others. So that's kind of my outside looking in at the ones that I felt should mention that weren't in my top 10. But let's go with the top 10. At number 10, I have what I think is a really strong Danzig song, which is Attitude. I like the way Glenn kind of carries the song Attitude. And it's really that's him at his best. That's less of the band, and the way he brings it, your fucking attitude, and bringing things along. Horror Business at number 9, which I thought would have been higher. It was just crowded out by a lot of the other songs, which were on the list.
Dude, that's the thing. Sorry, we're speeding through this really quickly. I want to talk about it a little bit more in depth because stuff like that, like, it's crazy that you can have a song like Attitude be 10 that they've got, and even then you could probably put it at 15 if you really had to.
Yeah,
like, and that's a great song. Like, it's wild that a band who really, when you think about it, dude, they don't have that many songs. Like, they really
2 albums. They have 2 albums.
Like, I was trying to think about it, and I was like, man, like, they don't have as many songs as Rancid does. They don't have as many songs as NoFX, but it's still hard to come up with a top 10. That tells you the quality of their songwriting, the quality of their lyrical content. I mean, what a band! What a band! Sorry, go ahead.
I think it really speaks to the fact that, like, we'll listen to them do these songs in different versions and accept that and buy them as releases, and we want to hear what they sounded like in different evolved forms. Speaking of, at number 8, one of their more polished songs, Where Eagles Dare. I can't tell you how many times as a kid me and my friends told each other I ain't no goddamn son of a bitch just because it sounded like such a funny thing we heard from a song. And then we get to my top 6 is really where the
what's number 7?
Oh, excuse me, number 7. We Are 138. How could I forget about that?
Yeah, there you go.
And now We Are 138 and Horror Business, I always get them confused sometimes. I kind of look at them as like a similar song. Very, very similar. That you don't say much. They're very much the same lyrical content. Like, they're part of the same story. It feels like lyrically.
Tell me if this makes any sense to you or not. Some songs that the Misfits have, something like We Are 138, I don't get it. Like, I don't get it. Like, it's cool and catchy, but I've heard it once. I don't need to hear it again, kind of thing. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily how I feel about it, but, like, it's a little overplayed maybe, and it wasn't good enough to get that play, in my opinion. I guess it's because it's so catchy. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's that, and then it's the limited amount of actual songs. It's like what you were saying earlier too. I think that's part
true
of it too. Whereas
like, I will.
You're not deep when you deep dive into the Misfits. You're not deep diving into a whole lot of, like, a massive catalog.
You're looking at like 4, 5, 6 records, maybe something like that.
Yeah,
a lot of it's like re-recordings, even.
Yeah,
so you probably have like
some of it's almost sounds like We Are 138, almost sounds like an unfinished song in a lot of ways. And a lot of these songs probably were unfinished.
That's kind of my point.
Not written to their full potential.
And I don't want to spoil my whole damn list by telling you what's not on it, but We Are 138 is not on it either. So, okay, your top 6, I'm pretty interested in this.
Now, number 6, a song that was once, I think, by very powerful people declared officially obscene. It is the song Bullet, a song that I absolutely love. If you're into JFK fanfic, like some of us are, this is the most interesting piece of JFK fan fiction that exists. So it's funny because it's really the nexus of the Ramones, because the Ramones' whole thesis is on Marilyn Monroe. And of course, you're gonna dive into Kennedy if you're gonna do some Marilyn Monroe stuff.
Very much so.
Even the Ghostface, all that's off of the name The Misfits comes from a Marilyn Monroe film.
Isn't that crazy how all that stuff is? Because that was like the peak of popularity, the peak of normal people was that stuff. They liked that stuff, and punk rock is so insistent on being outside the norm. But if you look at it, where did it come from? It came from popular culture.
But it's funny because it's like what they took is like they just had a fan culture. We would call that like stan culture today, but they just made a whole band and a whole identity off of like 50s horror movies. And again, like it's like they could be the theme band at like Universal Studios in the monster section, seriously, because
isn't that wild?
Yeah, and they're supposed to be like this dirty punk rock band, but really they're just like Hollywood. They're classic golden Hollywood is what they.
Well, they had every intention. So I'm so sorry. I keep talking over you. They had every intention in the world to like get famous and make money. They never set out to be broke, dirty punk kids. They weren't political at all. That's what it is. Is that I think a lot of people misunderstand punk because in its inception, it wasn't a political thing. It was just an attitude thing. It was a style and attitude. It was like a fuck off. I'm going to do what I want. Not necessarily like now. Do I appreciate the political punk stuff? I think I've really come around to understand even my opinion on that stuff, but it didn't start out that way. It started out as just a bunch of angry teenagers who just wanting to do what they wanted to do. it was still very rock and roll, more so than political. And I appreciate, and I think we do need the political stuff. So
yeah, and I think if there's any band that, like, there's a lot of bands where people argue, well, they weren't a political band or they're not a political band. The one band you can say that about is probably the Misfits, just because
very much so.
They're very much pop culture. Because that's the thing about the Misfits, that people say, like, you know, their lyrics are insane, and how come, like, people like that and don't like other stuff? But it's like, you know what you're getting with the Misfits. It's like, you know what it is. So it's not, you're not taking the lyrics of Last Caress literally. You know what I mean? It is.
Well, it'd be insane to do that. Like, there are insane people out there, but that would be real stupid.
But that's never been the deal you're making with the Misfits specifically, I don't think. Speaking of graphic content, number 5, Halloween, had to have it on there. Dead cats hanging from poles. Of course, again, I really like the way Davey Havoc
top 5,
that song. Yeah, I got it number 5. I have it number 5. I like the way I was thinking about the Davey Havoc version, how he really brings out the different ups and downs in that song, which has
he starts out and then it goes like their whole
like
version is very
like more range. I think that's
thank you, more range. The Misfits version is very haunting. It's a much slower pace. AFI one's more powerful and a lot more range. They're very different songs. I just appreciate the AFI one a little bit more, and it's not by a lot, man. I like the Misfits one version quite a bit, but top 5 is a nice spot for that song, sir.
And it is, and it's also it's got several things where you think the rhythm should stay one way and it switches very, very quickly, and that's what happens in a lot of Black Flag, happens in Rise Above, I think, pretty famously, but also happens in a lot of Misfits. All right, number 4, the aforementioned Last Caress. Now, there's been times where Last Caress has been my favorite Misfits songs. Again, one of the songs that I learned about the Misfits from. I learned about the Misfits through nothing to do with the Misfits, through Metallica's Garage Days EP, or the one they released in '98. I heard that, and I thought I heard them. I heard like 4 other punk bands I learned from that CD specifically.
Well,
I think Discharge I learned from there. Yeah.
Yes. So I learned a lot about punk through metal, because you had the Garage Days, and then you had Slayer that did Undisputed Attitude, and both of those are punk covers. Like, that's all that is punk rock stuff. And yes, I absolutely learned about the Misfits through Metallica, which is another reason why it was hard for me to listen to them, because Metallica had an excellent recording. And so when you go listen to the Misfits, you're like, what? And so they were of that era. They were born and raised in that era, so they liked those recordings. It's interesting how long it took me to get into this and appreciate it, because I don't think I was probably in my mid-20s before I really started listening to the old Misfit stuff. I was old. I was in my mid-20s, bro. So,
well, I think like the Metallica version, it sounds like there's gunshot blasts going off at the beginning.
Oh yeah,
I got something to say, boom, boom, you know, and it really hits off. You can also contrast that with like the NoFX cover, which they have a ska cover of Last Caress, which is totally on a whole different, whole different plane.
That's the stuff I don't like about NoFX. Stuff like that. Like, they're too silly sometimes. Like, chill, bro.
Last Caress, also to a fun, like, that's a good first song on the guitar. I think it's basically like the Blitzkrieg Bop, but with slightly different rhythms, but basically same pattern. Number 3.
Oh, so hold on. We got a drum roll, bro. Dude, top 3. This is big, man. I'm super curious. Based on, because I was writing your stuff down so I could look and remember back what you were saying. I'm real curious as to what your top 3 is about to be. So sorry, go ahead, man.
Very, very basic. It's very
Let's
basic.
go. I like
number 3, I have, of course, Skulls. I Want Your Skulls. I Need Your Skull. Just a classic song. And these top 3 songs, again, I think they are good songs regardless of the lyrical content. And that's the thing that, like, some of these kind of need that lyrical content to make them pop. To make I like Bullet, but I think Bullet kind of needs those wild lyrics to really get it over the top. I think these songs could have been singing about anything and they would have been good songs, but the fact that they're singing about wanting and needing your skull actually enhances them. And then,
hold on, I have a retort to that. So, like, with songs like We Are 138 and songs like Skulls and songs like Halloween, I think those are the songs you're supposed to like. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm so against the grain with this, how my brain operates. Now, do I like those songs? Of course I do. I'm not a complete idiot. Not all the time anyways. But yeah, man, I think those are like, kind of like, those are the typical songs that you would like. These are the ones that you would look up on a list of. Like, I don't necessarily think that they're their best songs, though, is what I was getting at. Anyways, continue. Number 2.
All right, number 2. This one was not hard to. Number 1 was pretty solid, but number 2, Astro Zombies. Absolutely love that song. Love actually the version there's a version that Matt Skiba busts out occasionally on acoustic sets and on live sets that I think he does
I
very,
love that guy.
very well. And then number one, which you've all been waiting for, this one was not going to be even in question when I thought of this list, Hybrid Moments. I think Hybrid Moments is by far the best Misfits song. I think it's one of the, I love the way, we talked about last week, the Distillers. There's a video online of Brody doing Hybrid Moments acoustic, and it is freaking amazing. And again, these songs translate into any genre, into any little thing. And again, lyrically, they're crazy. That's why I kind of glossed over them a little lyrically, because there's not a lot to break down. Like we can do Bad Religion and Pennywise, and we can spend 30 minutes on every song on all that stuff.
Right.
We don't really need to spend 30 minutes on, when creatures do that to your face or whatever that we have in Hybrid Moments. But you go to that chorus, and it's actually like a well-sung chorus. I don't want to do it. I don't want to embarrass myself, but you exactly know what I'm talking about.
I fully embarrassed myself earlier, so you're okay.
And if it's like, what was a good, I would say almost like average good punk song that you could kind of just crank out, it would probably sound like Hybrid Moments as far as like a pop punky stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's a good song. Same thing with Astro Zombies. I think both of those kind of filled that mold of very like standard songs, but also songs that I enjoy the lyrics, I enjoy singing along to, and that pretty much will never be skips for me. Anything in that top 5 are just ones that they come up I'm listening to, as is most Misfits songs.
I mean, I like your list. I liked your list a lot, actually. I don't think you're gonna like mine. Like looking back at your list, you're certainly not gonna agree with it. Mm-hmm. Hey man, pull your camera down a little bit, center yourself into the screen.
No, I'm all over the place tonight. I'm up, I'm down, I'm blurry. There we go.
There we go. Makes it a little bit easier from the viewer.
Yeah.
All right. So my top 10 Danzig Misfits songs. I got 2 that I'll say were my like honorable mentions. I couldn't decide if I wanted to get them in my top 10. I ultimately chose not to, but I do just think they deserve to be mentioned. Number 12, technically, I guess, would be Brain Eaters. I love that song, man. It's just so catchy. Every song on my list is catchy. This is my list. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily the list, although I would argue for any one of these songs at any spot that I put them in. Boy, I tell you, I'm a little surprised that you don't have a few of these on your list. I'm kind of worried what you're going to think about this list now, because Halloween is my number 11. It didn't even make my top 10. I just listened to it about 6 times and was like, man, it's a good song. I don't think it's necessarily a top 10, though. Especially when you have other versions that I think are far superior. So, okay, my top 10. 10 is going to be Where Eagles Dare. That was hard to say for some reason. Anyways, yes, super catchy chorus. So what I did when I started this list is that's the first song I thought of. So I wrote it down. And then I started writing songs around that song. Like, okay, is it better than that song or worse than that song? And I would place them there. So that's the fact that it ended at 10 is kind of crazy because it was the first one I thought of. Number 9 is very much a benchmark song. Number 9 is Death Comes Ripping. I don't know, man. I have a weird opinion on some of their songs, and I did get into them kind of late. So I think that all the really well-known songs, while I like and appreciate them, I think I heard them so much that when I started listening to Misfits by myself, some of my favorite songs on this list are going to be ones that aren't as popular just based on the fact that I haven't heard them as much. So maybe I haven't worn myself out on them. I think that does happen. It's like with Rancid stuff. The default is Out Come the Wolves, but what am I listening to the most? It's definitely later albums. It just is. Number 8, Ghouls Night Out. We've already talked about that one a little bit. It's a great song. Yeah, dude. This band is so catchy. I'm a little disappointed that I didn't have whatever it took to listen to them more as a youngster, man, because I think I would have loved, had I given them like the chance that they deserved, I think I would have spent a lot of time skateboarding around, daydreaming and drawing to this stuff, because this is so cinematic. It's funny because I like 50s and 60s music a lot of R&B, a lot of doo-wop, a lot of rock and roll. I grew up on that stuff. It's one of the reasons why I like this band so much, and I do wish I had given them a more of an opportunity to be a part of my youth than I did. Number 7 is Skulls. We've talked about that one a little bit already. Super catchy song. I just couldn't not put it in the list. I almost didn't, and I was like, dude, that's so dumb. Like, am I tired of the song? Kind of. Yeah, but every time I hear it, I sit there for 2 hours later going, I want to go. I need your love. Like, you know what I'm saying? You just the whole afternoon, I'm like typing.
Do you remember when Angela Hill from the UFC came out with Skulls as her walkout music?
No.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Dude, what is happening right now?
I did that in my living room for that whole afternoon.
Yeah, dude.
I want to say it was like in the pandemic era shows too, but there was nobody in the building.
That's crazy.
And Skulls was played, yeah.
That's
like,
awesome.
What a perfect fight song, though. I want
dude, that is a
like,
perfect fight song. Real quick, before I go any further, for anybody that's watching this, if you're a member of Patreon now, all my podcasts with guests outside of Rob and I, like, because this is going to get filmed one night and drop the next day usually. All my podcast guests that I film with on Tuesday or Monday that are like musicians and such, I'm going to upload those early to Patreon by a day or two. So I just wanted anybody that didn't necessarily get an email to know that that's happening. So number 6 for me is Attitude. Again, a song that started out way up higher on the list. It just kind of worked its way back a little bit. My top 5 is weird, bro. Like, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I like my top 5. I'm not sure how much people are gonna like roast me in the comments, dude, because I got some songs that just are missing that I don't care that they're missing, but some other people might. Okay, the top 5. She is number 5 for me. I love that damn song, bro. I'm looking at my number 1 and just laughing because you're gonna be like, wow. Okay, number 4. I'm surprised you didn't put Who Killed Marilyn on there anywhere. That song is awesome. Like, yeah, it's so good. And that's one that crept its way up. It started up at like 10, and it just kept working its way further down towards number 1. Obviously, number 1 would be kind of crazy, but bro, that song is so good, man. Number 3, I chose Static Age for number 3. It's a song that I really like. I listen to it. It never really gets old. I really like all these top 3. These last 3, honestly, the top 5 I can listen to pretty much anytime, especially since
has
I
like
have
that rock and roll vibe that you like too. I think.
Oh, I love it, man. Yeah. You know what I'm into, man.
Like Static Age and Attitude both have that sort of that style.
Yeah. It's just like a bunch of downstroke, real just dude, very Ramonesy. My top 5 is since I've got She and Who Killed Marilyn at the top of it. Like, it's songs that I'm never going to get tired of because they never got overplayed for me. But number 2. I picked Horror Business. I really enjoy that song a lot. I don't know what else to say about it, man. Like you said, the lyrics are simple. The recording quality is left a little bit to be desired, but they've had in the past demo versions that I've enjoyed of a lot of these songs. Not necessarily that one. I'm not just speaking in general. But they've also had like remasters and other stuff. Like, you can hear them and then go back to the old version and it sounds a little better to you. Have you ever tried that?
Well, like as I was doing this, I went to that box set that had several versions of like not that far apart, and I was listening. I listened to like the Hybrid Moments. I listened to like 3 different versions of it back to back to back.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because there's different recording and there's nuances in certain little ways they play different parts and different things that are in there too. You know, which you don't know if that's intentional or that's just hey, you started adding this when you were playing it live or what is it?
I find when you listen to a better version of a song that when you go back to the older version, it sounds a little better. I don't know if that's just me being like romantic about a song I really love, or if it's just some kind of placebo effect or something. I don't know. But I tend to be able to hear things that I didn't hear the first time after hearing better versions. I don't know I don't really know what I mean by that. I feel like that's happening a lot.
I tend to go back more if I like a song. I'll listen to other versions, even if it's not necessarily my style of consuming that song, because I'll have an appreciation for the song.
Yeah. So what do you think my number 1 is? Just take one guess.
Wolf's Blood. I don't know. I'm just looking down.
No, my number 1 is Bullet. I think that's the best Misfits song. I think I wasn't, when I was doing my list, I was like, okay, what are my like favorite Misfits songs? And I kept thinking like, okay, this is the best Misfits stuff though. Like, my list, I think, is the best list. Like, I know it's probably not, but I look at it and go, I don't know, man. I don't see how you can argue this list. But there's a few that were missing off of mine that were on yours.
I like
Yeah.
that Bullet so up high though, because like I had Bullet originally at number 5, and then I started stuffing some other ones that I forgot about, and it went down to number 6. I mean, I just didn't go down that far. To me, it just wasn't quite to the level of those other ones that I find a little more just listenable. Whereas
Yeah.
Bullet like is a full experience though too, and I think that's why it's a little bit different type of song.
It fits my personality so much. Like everything about it is like, okay, that's stuff that I like. That's a sound, it's a rhythm, it's a pace, the content. It's all stuff that I really enjoy. But like I don't have like Astro Zombies, I don't have Hybrid Moments, I don't have We Are 138. And I think people will probably I'll have like probably a split crowd with that. It'll be people are going to understand why I don't, and some people are going to think it's crazy that I don't. I'll probably get a little shit for it. It's okay though, man. I don't mind. Just to reiterate before we move on to another topic, another question anyway, still talking about Misfits. My top 10 Danzig Misfits songs are in this order. Number 10, Where Eagles Dare. Number 9, Death Comes Rippin'. Number 8, Ghouls Night Out. Number 7, Skulls. Number 6, Attitude. Number 5 is She. 4, Who Killed Maryland. Number 3 is Static Age. Number 2 is Horror Business. And number 1 is Bullet. Rob, do you want to go through your 10 real quick?
Sure. At number 10, I got Attitude. Number 9, Horror Business. Number 8, Where Eagles Dare. Number 7, We Are 138. Number 6, Bullet. Number 5, Halloween. Number 4, Last Caress. Number 3, Skulls. Number 2, Astro Zombies. And number 1, Hybrid Moments.
Dude, I think we represented the Misfits well with both of our lists. They're just different
five
enough.
in common, and then
and I think it's just enough to really cover the entirety of who are the Misfits and what because like I'm a little bit more of how do I say this? I'm a little bit more left of center. Like I'm a little more outside the lines with just my whole life. Like I got face tattoos and I pretty much work for myself for the most part. And it's difficult. You know what I'm saying? Dropped out of school. You're like the opposite of that, man. You like went to school and you're doing things to help your community. I am definitely not quite there. I mean, I'm doing some things. But you know what I'm saying? You're teaching kids, man, like and I don't mean that in any negative way, but that's reflected in our lists. Like you can look at our lists and tell things like that. But I like that. That's exactly what makes this conversation fun. It's what makes our friendship work so well because we like plenty of stuff the same and we got plenty of our own identity, you know. Before we go on to anything else, let's talk for a minute about the Misfits and their impact on just music in general. What do you think the legacy of the Misfits is?
Well, it's a few things. I would say I don't know whether it's big or little, but I don't have a good sense of their actual legacy within punk, like their influence within punk itself.
Okay.
And because I think I think they were influential on a certain number of bands, but I think a lot of the they were kind of in the sauce of when they came out, and I think like the Ramones were just as influential, if not more influential. A lot of other bands around them in punk were so influential. They're extremely influential though. In other genres of music and other forms of entertainment, they are extremely influential. In that way, they're some of the most influential punk band of all time on that list. Like I said, not just the Metallica covers, but like Cliff Burton's whole identity was a Misfits fan. That was like his persona within Metallica, as the guy who wore the Misfits shirt and had the Misfits tattoo. They're big into thrash metal, the imagery, the horror movie stuff, all that. And they are the reason why we say, oh, do you like the shirt or do you actually know the lyrics? Like they're the band of why we say that so much. And I actually kind of hate that because some people will say like it just speaks to they didn't have good songs. People only like the Misfits because of their iconography. No, they have both. I have Misfits vinyl and I got a Misfits tattoo, and because it looks cool, because I like the way they do that stuff. They are good at both. I just don't know how influential they necessarily were musically within punk. That's the one thing I do kind of question a little bit.
It's interesting because we don't usually 100% agree. I think we're pretty close to 100% agreement on this. I think that their legacy is so big and it reaches so far outside of punk rock that while I know them as a punk band, dude, you see 46-year-old blonde, sharp haircutted minivan driving moms wearing Misfits shirts, and they know some of the songs. And that's crazy to me. And I think the fact that they're associated with something like Halloween as like the holiday, I think that gives them another push. Then they were covered by metal bands. Boom, another push. Then they had this huge blow up within the band, and then they came back with Glenn. They're touring now. Huge push. They got one of the most iconic logos of all time, which I feel is kind of crazy since they stole it. Like, I mean, it's bananas that they're able to do that. But whatever, man. But they still have it. And I'm not talking crap. I love the Misfits. I love their logo. I've got some of their vinyl as well. I don't have a tattoo. I probably should get one. Why not? I don't care. I love the Misfits. But like, yeah, I think that they affect so much. I do agree with the Ramones thing. I think the Ramones would be the more influential punk rock band, but the more influential group of people would have to be the Misfits.
I think
they've affected movies, music. I mean, dude, I literally don't think that we would have like, and as much as I don't care for this dude's stuff that much, the guy himself is cool. I don't think we'd have Rob Zombie like we do if it wasn't for the Misfits. And I don't like his movies a lot. There's a couple that I do like, but as a person, that guy's awesome, man. And he makes, interesting enough music. He's got some songs that I like. Dude, if you listen to some of his like Rob Zombie solo material, you hear a whole lot of Michael Graves' Misfits in that stuff, even down to the guitar tone, dude, like a lot. So, I think that even stuff like Art the Clown, I'm looking at my wall and thinking like, doggone, man, I don't know if we'd have that without the Misfits. I mean, they're on a different level, man. I think that they're basically they're like the dirty, rotten punk rock version of Kiss, man.
They really are. I've gone down so many Reddit rabbit holes of comparing that the Misfits are the Kiss of punk, and like literally when I was a little kid, I'd get them confused because they had a similar thing.
Black and white,
yeah. And again, thinking of that Graves era Misfits specifically, that's also the era where Kiss had their little comeback too with Psycho Circus in 1999. So
it is, isn't it?
It's kind of similar. The other one though, as you were talking about, is like they're a little bit Kiss. They're also kind of the Van Halen of punk rock in that they're the two singers. They're the multiple eras like that. They have a lot of commonality, I think, with Van Halen. They also are, I said they're not influential musically, but they also are very unique musically. Part of it's because like they build their own instruments and stuff. Like Jerry's bass is built by Jerry. What's his name? Wolfgang's guitar was built by Wolfgang. Just through that classic sort of punk rock necessity that we always talk about. And so they have that uniqueness to them. They also, what they don't get credit for is they eventually learned how to play their instruments as time went on and stuff. And they got really, really sharp at doing what they did.
Way better now than they were in the 80s and even, I guess early 80s, late 70s. They're way better now, man. And I think that they even spawned, I mean, you have like full-on metal bands that cite them as their main influence. Like you have stuff like the Murder Dolls and Wednesday 13. That's not punk, dude. Like
we share. It's like I think they're the most. They're maybe the most shared band too between. Punk
and they're like they're
them and Motorhead are like the ones that like.
Dude, yes. Them and Motorhead are the two bands that bring metal and punk rockers together the most.
Big summit that happens. Like and honestly, remember the original Misfits played last year, and I think like. One show was the opening band was Megadeth, and the other one was AFI. I mean,
that's
not
so
exactly
awesome.
Similar, but they both fit with a Misfits build perfect.
That's I love Megadeth though. I'm a big Megadeth fan. I think it's cool because the Misfits gave you an iconic logo, basically an entire genre of music. They birthed the hairstyle with the devil lock. That was never going to be cool until they did it. Yeah, man. I think Psychobilly wouldn't be around like it is. Like, that's interesting, man. Misfits have a very, very storied and important legacy, in my opinion.
They just weren't very loved, I think, in the time period that we talk about a lot, and so that's where, like, their renaissance happened almost after. Like, you think about like the early 2000s, everyone's like re into the Ramones and stuff, and like the Misfits. I feel like there was the Metallica stuff and all that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, like post Graves, the Misfits were such a dead brand. And it didn't feel like till years later that they kind of just, they kept the momentum going and people got the thirst for these reunions and that kind of stuff.
Man, I guess we just grew up in completely different, like, because you often say things like that and I just don't have the same experience. Like, there's never been a time in Houston, Texas where the Misfits weren't the Misfits. Like that never, I can't recall ever being around a group of punks or metalheads or just rock and rollers in general that the Misfits weren't the shit. Like they've always been that band down here. But I mean, dude, we have a weird, we as in like Houstonians have like or Texans, South U.S. people, you know what I'm saying, like Southern United States folks, like down here in Texas and Louisiana and Florida, we have a little different thing going on, man. Like I do notice that a lot. Like I'll hear other people talk, not just you, just in general. And it's interesting the stuff that people will say, oh, I remember when this was popular. And I'm like, that never really wasn't popular down here. Or when they say, I remember when this was popular. And I also can go, oh, that was never popular down here. Like, and we have like, even down to like our cars down here. We have something in Houston that nobody else in the entire
culture,
so I think we're just kind of stuck in our own little bubble, maybe, but because we're so far away from everything, it's kind of hard to transport that stuff. But
you know what band we wouldn't have? We would not have NoFX. Fat Mike's, like, his band is the Misfits. That was Fat Mike's band. That is.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He refined this. They refined the sound of NoFX after Bad Religion and Suffer came around. But like his kind of original, like early Misfits shows our early NoFX shows are just tons of Misfits covers that they're playing and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's Mike. Cool. That's part of Mike. Like Mike, one of Mike's bass has the little Misfits inset there on the head.
I've probably heard that a bunch. And
that was
didn't
his
retain
thing.
The information.
I think when he got the name Fat Mike, he would wear the devil lock like in college and stuff, and that was just sort of.
Oh, I've never seen his thing with the devil lock, but that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's funny. You don't necessarily associate the Misfits and NoFX, but actually like Fat Mike's whole like punk rock, really awakening. The Misfits were his band very much.
Dude, that is crazy because I don't associate those two bands.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that was a fun conversation.
Yeah,
it went by a little faster than I thought it was gonna. I really thought we were gonna talk until 10 o'clock tonight, but I mean, whatever.
Covered it all though too.
No, we went pretty quick tonight. I think it's because we were actually a little more prepared than normal.
Yeah, a lot of agreement.
A lot of times we get like 80% prepared, but I think we were like ready to go tonight. I know I was.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have like a bunch of clips from this one come up too. Like I'm gonna have probably 7 videos out of this podcast. So, man, bro, I really enjoy hanging out with you on here, man. I cannot wait to go hang out with you in Vegas, brother.
That's all I'm thinking about.
Dude, I'm telling you. Yeah, to anybody that doesn't know what's going on, man, I'm going to Vegas next Monday, or like on the 16th, and then Rob's going to be there on the 19th at night, and we're going to hang out on the 20th, like in person. We're going to get footage. I'm bringing a camera. I'm bringing my phone. Obviously, I'm bringing my GoPro with 3 extra batteries and a very large memory card, and I'm bringing 2 tripods. Dude, we're going to get some footage, man. I'm bringing a selfie stick to do the walkthrough with, bro. I'm telling you, I'm going to have so much footage that by the end of the year, I'm still going to be cutting up footage from this trip. I guarantee it. And it's going to be awesome. I'm going to do some exclusive stuff for Patreon. I don't know what yet. I'm going to do something for Patreon. I'm going to do a live stream over there. Bro, I can't wait, man. I can't wait. I'm going to film. Dude, when we meet up for lunch, just be ready. I'm filming it. Like, nice. It's going to be so rad. It's going to be so rad. Oh, I made you one of these.
I was going to shout you out. Like, the only Doom Regulator shirt in existence right now has got to be the one on your chest, right?
Yeah, probably. I haven't seen one otherwise. But I made you one of these, and nice. I made you a Bullshit Detector shirt so you can represent 31 Records a little bit. And it's a good shirt, too. And they're both black with gray ink, so they look real good with just about anything. So, nice. But hell yeah. Anything you want to talk about before we get out of here?
No, man. October is one of my favorite months of the year, and it's a lot of Misfits and a lot of this stuff, weather, all this stuff.
Oh, if you're still watching, in a couple of weeks, we're doing the top 5 horror punk bands. Throw some ideas down in the comments, man. Like, throw us something we might not have heard. I already know Blitzkid, and we know Misfits, of course. Like, throw me anything you know of that's like and I would say Psychobilly will be included in that. I don't see how you can't. It's basically just punk with a stand-up bass. So yeah, dude. Top 5.
Help us define horror punk, I would say.
Yeah, man.
Because it's a pretty broad
topic. I have one that I'm going to include that is going to be my honorable mention that I already know, and it's somebody that y'all are going to go, oh, of course. So I have some good podcasts coming up. I got Mike from Bad Time Records coming on tomorrow. He's also in Kill Lincoln. So, man, I got a lot of shit happening, dude. So, yeah, I'm loving this stuff, man. Absolutely loving it. Oh, we got top 5 pop punk bands coming soon, and our top 10 punk rock bands just in general, like our personal top 10 lists. So November should be a lot of fun as well. October, November, hella fun over here at the Punk Rock Review and the Punk Odds. So, dude, I met a guy on my 1,000 subscriber live stream that you weren't on.
I was asleep when you texted me.
Were you?
Yeah.
Man, I was so bummed that you weren't on there. But one of the guys that was on there, he actually got my channel through you. So thank you, man. I actually have to thank you. I owe you a lot, man, because I was never going to do another channel.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, this is what we did doesn't fit on that other channel. And I just started another one. And like, I'm all but quitting the other channels, and I'm happy to do it. Dude, think about that. I'm willing to give up a 27.2 thousand subscriber channel to focus on this. That tells you how much money doesn't matter. I wasn't making a ton anyways, but like it matters if you love what you're doing, man.
And you're not a slave to just doing what people want to watch, and you're doing what you want to make. So,
well, the craziest thing is people are actually enjoying this channel, and I'm doing what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I did that Bad Religion clip, and it's doing really well. I did the Sublime one, got like 1,500 views. Like what?
It's crazy,
dude. It's so crazy. The Blink-182 videos I got, all of them were over 2,500 views. I think the last one was like almost 4K. Insane, dude. Like absolutely insane. So, well, I'm gonna go eat my dinner. Keep an eye out for some text, Rob. I'm sure I'll hit you up. Dude, 1 week and some change, I'll be hanging out with you in Vegas, bro. I cannot believe this is happening, dude. I'm crazy. Dude, I'm not too punk rock to be excited for this, man. I can't wait, dude. I can't wait, man.
It's wild that it's coming together like that. That is just...
Dude, how crazy it actually happened. Because then when you mentioned it like 2.5 months ago, I was like, oh, we were planning on going in October too. And then I was like, what dates? I can maybe make that happen. And then I finagled it and worked it out. And then I mentioned it to my wife like about 3 weeks ago or so. And then we were like, let's just do it. And we just did it. And I got the time off of work. She got the time off of work. And I was like, oh shit, we're doing it. And like, so we're already got an itinerary picked up, bro. We're doing so much shit, dude. Because we're going to be there for almost 5 days. And we're not doing any fest stuff. We're doing the Punk Rock Museum twice. We're doing the UFC Apex. We're doing the Grand Canyon.
Oh, nice.
We're going to try to... Oh, yeah. So Tuesday morning when we get there at Monday night, we're going to kind of go dick around for an hour or two. We're going to wake up at like 8:30 on Tuesday. We're going to drive out to the Grand Canyon, spend the morning out there, come back, do a Punk Rock Museum thing. Well, that closes at like 8 or 9. So we'll have the whole night to do whatever we want. We're going to go get some fancy food. I want to go take her dancing. She doesn't know that yet, but I want to go take her dancing. I want to go, we're going to see some kind of street magic. I'm not sure who yet. I think Chris Angel's still out there in Vegas operating. Oh, I'm super into that kind of stuff. It's so dumb, but I love it. I love it. Yeah. It's so hard to figure out, bro. I look at it as like a challenge. Like, let me figure this shit out.
Yeah. How do they do that?
Yeah. And then, yeah, man, we still have like another day and a half of stuff, but we're going to go hit up 1 or 2 like slot machines. We're going to do 1 or 2 31s and then throw it on black. Should be good, man. Should be a good time.
Love it.
So are you going strictly for the festivals?
Mostly, yeah.
So Friday is going to be like your free day where you're going to go.
That's my fun day. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to have lunch and then we're going to do the thing at 2:00. I'm probably going to have to bail out of there at like 5. So you'll have a whole bunch of time to go do whatever you want. Cause I got to be back on my plane. I think on the plane at 8, something like that. So yeah, I'll be heading out of there. You know, we're going to have to turn in the car and all this shit. So, man, I'm excited, dude. Thank you for hanging out and going to lunch and all that shit too. I appreciate that, bro. Yeah, that means a lot to me, man. This is a friendship that I really appreciate. So
looking forward, like once that got like a lot of other stuff with the chip has fallen into place, and that was kind of the first like thing where it's like, because even I was like, is it really worth me going and stuff? And like that was kind of like, you know what? Like now I'm gonna meet friends. I'm gonna, that's
bro,
like this whole thing,
Right? Yeah. Even thinking about like, oh, should I go? And then it's like, well, I can go too and meet you there. It's like, well, now I don't want to not go. Like, yeah, I gotta go now. That's exactly how I felt. I was like, if I go within like a 2-month span of you being there and I didn't go when you were there, I'm gonna be so pissed off at myself. For a minute, I thought it wasn't gonna work out, and I was getting kind of depressed because I was like, dude, I'm never gonna go hang out with the homie if I don't go do it now. I was supposed to go fly out to Florida and meet TJ Trainwreck, and I never got to do that. So, like, I was really thinking, like, oh, it's going to be another one of those situations. But anyways, all right, folks, we're going to shut up and get out of here. I'm sure you're probably all out of here already anyways. Thank you for your time if you're still around. I love you guys. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Go over and check out the Punk Odds and support independent punk rock and DIY music, all right? Peace.